She just wanted to tease him, but her alien body triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. Zara had always been curious about the human engineer who worked in the lower decks of the Starship Horizon, and his name was Jake Morrison, and he was the kind of human who kept to himself and focused on his work with an intensity that fascinated her. And she was a Siler from the planet Valoria, and her species was known for their luminescent skin that shifted colors based on their emotions and their ability to sense electromagnetic fields, and she had been assigned to the human vessel as part of an interspecies exchange program, and for 3 months she had watched Jake from a distance, admiring the way his hands moved with precision when he repaired the ship systems and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at his crewmates. The other humans on the ship had warned her about getting too close to Jake because he was dedicated to his work and didn't have time for distractions. But Zara didn't see it that way, and she saw it as a challenge, and besides, she had noticed the way his pulse quickened whenever she walked past him in the corridors, and her species could detect such things, and the electromagnetic signature of a racing heart was impossible to miss, and so she decided to have a little fun with him. It started innocently enough, and she began finding excuses to visit the engineering bay, and she would lean over his shoulder while he worked, asking questions about the plasma conduits and the quantum drive systems, and Jake would answer patiently, his voice steady, but she could feel the tension in his biofield, and the way his nervous system lit up like a star going supernova whenever she got close, and her skin would shimmer with playful purple hues and sometimes flickers of gold. And she knew he noticed because his hands would pause mid-task, and his breathing would change. One evening when the night shift left them mostly alone in the engineering section, Zara decided to push things further, and she wore a uniform that was slightly more form-fitting than usual. And her species didn't have the same concept of modesty as humans did, and clothing for Silers was more about function than coverage. And she found Jake working on a particularly stubborn power relay, and his uniform was smudged with grease and his hair was messy from running his hands through it, and she thought he looked adorable. "Hey, Jake," she said, sliding up beside him, and her voice was light and teasing. "And need any help?" He glanced at her and then quickly looked away, and his face was turning that interesting shade of red that humans did when they were flustered. "And I'm good, thanks, and just trying to figure out why this relay keeps overheating." She leaned in closer and her shoulder brushed against his, "And maybe it's because you're so focused that you're generating extra heat." And she let her skin pulse with a warm amber glow, and the light danced across his face. Jake cleared his throat, and "Zara, that's not how thermodynamics works." She laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes, and, "Oh, I know, but you're so serious all the time, and don't you ever just relax?" He set down his tools and turned to face her, and his expression was somewhere between amused and exasperated. "And I relax, and I just happen to be working right now." She tilted her head, and her eyes were wide and innocent looking, and her skin shifted to a soft blue. "And is that why your heart rate goes up every time I come near you? And is that work-related stress?" His eyes widened slightly, "And you can tell that?" She nodded, "And my species can sense bioelectric fields, and your heart is very loud, Jake." He rubbed the back of his neck in a nervous habit she had catalogued. "And okay, that's a little embarrassing." She stepped closer, and her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "And why? And I think it's sweet." And that was when everything went wrong. The moment her fingers made contact with his skin, something in her biology reacted in a way she had never experienced before, and her people could sense electromagnetic fields, but they could also generate them. And usually it was a minor thing, and a way to communicate with technology or with each other. But touching Jake and feeling the raw vitality of his nervous system, and the way his cells practically hummed with life, and it triggered something primal in her physiology. Her skin flared bright white and brighter than she had ever glowed before, and energy crackled across her body in visible arcs, and Jake jerked back in surprise, but it was too late. And the electromagnetic pulse that erupted from her body hit the power relay he had been working on, and then cascaded through the entire engineering bay. Alarms screamed to life, and the lights flickered and died, and emergency backup systems kicked in, bathing everything in red light, and Zara stumbled backward, her body still crackling with uncontrolled energy, and she could feel it burning through her, and too much too fast, and her species was supposed to be able to regulate this, but she couldn't stop it. "Jake," and she gasped, and her voice was strained, "and something's wrong." He was already moving, and his training overriding his shock. And he hit the emergency, shut down for the main power grid and talked to me, Zara. What's happening? She tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. And her skin was cycling through colors rapidly, and white to blue to violet to red, and energy arced from her fingertips to the metal walls, and she could feel the ship systems responding to her, and every computer and every circuit. And they were all screaming at her in a language of electromagnetic chaos, and she was connected to all of it, and she couldn't disconnect. The intercom crackled to life in engineering. This is the bridge, and what the hell just happened down there? Jake grabbed the comm unit, and Captain Rodriguez, we have a situation, and I need medical, and I need someone who understands Siler biology. Zara collapsed to her knees, and the energy was still pouring out of her, and she could feel it spreading through the ship, and the lights in the corridors were flickering in patterns that matched her heartbeat, and the navigation computers were receiving input they couldn't process, and somewhere deep in the ship the quantum drive was starting to resonate with her frequency. Sorry, she whispered, and I didn't know this would happen. Jake knelt beside her and careful not to touch her directly. And okay, listen to me, and you need to calm down, and your emotions affect your energy output, right? She nodded weakly. And yes, but I can control it. A thought fast in his engineer brain working through the problem, and okay, the ship is acting like a giant antenna for whatever you're putting out, and we need to ground you and discharge the excess energy. How? She asked, and her voice was barely audible over the crackling energy. He looked around the engineering bay, and his eyes landing on the plasma vent system and the vents, and they channel excess energy from the reactors into space, and if I can connect you to that system. He didn't wait for her to respond, and he grabbed a set of heavy-duty power cables, and the kind used for emergency repairs, and he wrapped one end around a support beam in creating a ground, and then he looked at her. And I need you to trust me. She met his eyes, and even through her panic, she could see the determination there. And I trust you. He used an insulated glove to take her hand, and her skin was hot to the touch and energy dancing across her body, and he guided her to the cables. And when I say now, I need you to grab this cable with both hands and don't let go, no matter what. Now, she grabbed the cable, and the moment she did, the excess energy found its path, and it ripped through her and into the cable and through the plasma vent system and out into the void of space. And she screamed, and not from pain but from the intensity of it, and it felt like her entire being was being poured out and scattered among the stars. Jake held her shoulders and steady and keeping her upright as the energy drained away, and the alarms gradually quieted and the lights stabilized, and after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes, the crackling stopped and her skin faded to a dim, exhausted gray. She released the cable and collapsed against him, and her body was trembling, and he caught her in his arms, careful and supportive. And hey, and you're okay. And it's over. Medical burst through the door, led by Dr. Lisa Chen, who immediately began scanning Zara with her equipment. And what happened here? Jake explained while the doctor worked, and Zara could barely keep her eyes open, and she had never felt so drained in her life, and her species could go days without sleep. But right now she felt like she could sleep for a week. The doctor finished her scans and she stabilized, but I need to get her to medical bay, and whatever happened, it burned through about 80% of her bioelectric reserves, and she needs rest and probably some specialized treatment. As they lifted her onto a stretcher, Zara reached out and caught Jake's hand. And I'm sorry, she whispered. And I just wanted to tease. You and I didn't mean to cause all this. He squeezed her hand gently, and a small smile on his tired face. And I know, and we'll figure this out over the next few days. As Zara recovered in medical bay, the full extent of what had happened became clear, and Dr. Chen explained that Silers had a defensive mechanism built into their biology. And when they felt intense emotion, combined with physical contact with certain bioelectric signatures, they could discharge massive amounts of energy, and it was meant to ward off predators. But in Zara's case, her attraction to Jake had been so strong that when she touched him, her body interpreted it as a need to display, and to show her power, and to prove herself as a mate. It was mortifying. Jake visited her every day and bringing her reports about the repairs to the ship, and apparently her energy discharge had actually fixed several problems that engineering had been working on for weeks. And the quantum drive.